3 years ago, my Aunt Charlotte and cousin Sonia went to their family campsite, a disused gold claim property called Camp Arnold, for a long weekend. They didn't return from their trip. Search and rescue volunteers located their backpacks and lots of tracks, but no bodies were ever recovered. It gets weirder. My cousin received these emails last week. They appear to be from his mom, detailing the days before she disappeared. He started reading them, then sent them to me because he was worried they would ruin his memories of her. We can't figure out why the emails just now appeared. His mom's phone and tablet were not recovered with the rest of her gear. He wants me to tell him the sanitized version of what she wrote. He wants to know if anything in the emails explains why they vanished. I don't think I'm going to be able to tell him the truth, if that's even what this is. I'm removing the dates and specifics from the emails so they can't be identified from news articles. Names have obviously been changed. Thursday. Sam. We made it to Camp Arnold. Sonia got carsick on the drive out and still felt rotten through the hike to the cabin. She went straight inside to set up her sleeping mat as we made it just before dusk. We didn't bother with anything more than granola bars for dinner, although I did get the wood stove going and we had enough water left for tea. Copper was a little anxious, but he settled down once the stove had warmed everything up. The weather was wonderful for our hike. The wildflowers have quadrupled since I was here in April. You and Jimmy did a fantastic job finishing up the cabin. I was very glad to see we have a roof and a door now. Please let the girls know I saw the painted stones they left to mark the last fork in the trail. Beautiful. We could use a few more in the garden. I brought some bamboo to help outline the new beds, and I'm sure the compost from all the clearing we did last year will be good enough by now. Planning to work on the garden through the weekend and then head back to town on Tuesday morning for Emerson's baseball game. Sonia brought a map of the original gold claim on this property and is convinced she's going to locate the entrance to a mine. I bet it's all collapsed by now, if they ever even broke ground. I remember, way back when Dad bought the property, he searched for it too but never found anything. The cell service has been worse than usual, but actually that's part of the charm for me. I know if your dad could be here he'd be out on the rocks with his easel first thing tomorrow, painting the view into the canyon and getting a sunburn on his neck. I feel him with me everywhere, but especially here. None of us ever really leave this earth, do we? Signed, Mom. Friday. Hi Sam. I am dog tired, but I got 2 very cute little garden beds dug out on the south side of the cabin. The soil is uneven, some areas are too hard to do more than scratch away at, and others are much easier to dig into. Occasionally there's an obstruction, stones and buried wood I guess, and most of these I leave because the garden doesn't need to be dug deep. I planted zinnias and sunflowers right in front. The birds will like the sunflowers, although it's so dry out here it's unlikely any of it will survive long enough to bloom. Sonia made eggs and noodles on the wood stove today, and we had a good feast for lunch. Good thing too, because Copper was a little crazy all afternoon. She hiked him as far as she could to try to wear him out, but as soon as they got back in the cabin he was poking at the door to be let out again while she was bone-weary and ravenous. Maybe he mistakes the wind and the sagebrush for the sound of Dad hiking back for dinner. Maybe he just prefers camping in a tent. I, on the other hand, much prefer my cot in the cabin to the cold hard ground. The only modern convenience I'm missing at the moment is light. I can't figure out where I put my flashlight, and we got in so late yesterday we didn't bother stringing up the solar lights and then forgot about them. So now I'm already in bed, writing emails I can't send instead of what I'd really like to do, which is check out these old coins I found when I was digging the garden beds today. There are 3 of them. They look like they could be silver, but they don't have faces on them, just words and shapes that look sort of like birds. Crudely carved birds, I guess. I couldn't read the lettering on them, and then, after dinner, by the time I remembered them in my pocket and was ready to see them up close with clean hands and my glasses on, it had gotten too dark. I'll send you a picture in the morning. They remind me of the big silver dollars you and Dad used to hunt for. They might have been here since the 1850s, when the claim was first active. Maybe they're even worth something? All my love to you and the girls. Signed, Mom. Saturday. Sam. It's around noon and I'm stuck inside. We're having a terrible dust storm. It almost makes me wish we had windows, but I secured the curtain flaps down and the Velcro is doing a good job so far. The sound the wind makes whistling through the flaps is very unnerving. It's like a person moaning. Maybe that's why Copper was so on edge. Maybe he could hear the air passing through this place all along. And I'm on edge now too, I guess. Sonia is out there with Copper, somewhere. She had her sun hat and her walking poles and said she was going down to the base of the cliff to find the entrance to the mine. I was in the garden, not paying so much attention, and she mentioned she was looking all around for her flashlight. I said she couldn't have mine because I couldn't find it either. And she said, "Isn't that odd?" But I had just found more of those funny coins just an inch or two under the soil. I have a whole handful of them now. They're heavy and bright and really very beautiful. And I brought the coins inside and stacked them on the table before I really registered what she'd said. I looked up and there she was, well away down the trail already, walking toward the canyon path with Copper at her heels. And yes, of course she was right, it is all very odd. It's not just the flashlights. I had a bunch of paracord I'd used to tie up the bamboo that I packed in for the garden. I looped it up and hung it from one of the front rafters, and now it's disappeared. Sonia asked me what I did with her beef jerky. She had a big bag of it, she said, left on the shelf by the front door since her hike yesterday. We both shrugged it off and blamed Copper, but there would have been a torn-up package to find if he'd eaten it. Neither of us admitted that we knew it wasn't him. And I think I may have found a bone buried back near the new garden beds. Maybe an old animal bone, maybe not. I suppose I'd rather not be certain. But I keep finding coins, and the coins seem to be leading me back toward the bone, if that makes any sense. Of course it doesn't. But there's a bad feeling hovering around all of it, a feeling that I don't want Sonia to know what could be there, and a feeling that Copper knows already. He avoids the garden now, and he barks at the wind. It's odd to think our family has been camping here for so many years, but there might be more to the place than we knew, right beneath the surface. Sunday. Sam. I would say sorry for worrying you, but I see none of my messages have managed to send yet. I just see that little sending wheel that spins and spins. I should send Sonia to the top of a hill with my tablet later to see if we can get some updates from the real world. She was holed up in a cave by the base of the canyon with Copper while they waited for the windstorm to die down yesterday. I let my mind run away with itself a little, I guess. She did too, she said. She said she saw footprints in the loose dust down at the base of the canyon, strange ones, as if made by a dress shoe, squared heel and pointed toe. She didn't know what to make of it, but they seemed to be leading toward the part of the canyon where she'd been wanting to go, a cleft in the rocks where they sloped to a low point, where there was rubble and maybe an opening. Then the wind kicked up and she ran back toward the path, and the alcove where she sheltered. I can hear the curiosity in her voice still, but there's apprehension too. It gets eerie in remote places like this. You come across bones or a mark in the dust and your mind makes up stories. Sonia has always been tough, but sometimes I forget that all three of you kids are grown up now. I look at her and see my little 3-year-old with skin knees and hair bows, chasing after big brothers that never wanted to slow down for her. We had tuna salad for dinner and a little glass of wine. I can't believe Sonia will be 30 next year. I can't believe my only daughter lives all the way in California. It's harder accepting the big transitions when it's your youngest. Today Sonia said she'll stay close to the cabin and help me in the garden. Only 2 nights left before we head back to civilization. There's something big I'm hoping to have her help me clear away, an old dried up root, I told her, but I've suspected for a while now that it must be another bone. It adds up, the coins, the soft and hard places in the soil. I think my garden overlaps with someone's burial place. If I'm right, I'd like to move what I can of the remains into a proper grave well back in the sagebrush, where it's nicely marked but also out of sight. I got an early start with my trowel, moving dirt, digging toward the root-like object. It was long and hard, and eventually I uncovered the end of it where it rounded off, becoming unmistakably a femur. and as I excavated around it I found more, cracked and desiccated pieces of a pelvis, a smashed piece of brass, a buckle, part of a tool, and coins, more coins than before, not just the odd silver ones, but now identifiable ones too, pennies and $half and some misshapen pieces of raw gold. "Mom, what the hell?" Sonia yelled from the cabin's back door. Her voice was unusually high and shrill. I shrugged, guessing that the extra time I'd had in proximity to the bones made the horror of their discovery easier to bear. I wasn't horrified, but I was sorry. I hadn't intended to disturb anyone with my silly garden project, and I also didn't feel great about having taken coins from a burial place. I scooped up all the coins I displaced with this last dig and put them in my hat, standing up with it in my hands like a bowl, looking down at the partly exposed skeleton. I realized I didn't have the energy or time to exhume the rest of him, dig a new grave, and move him. I'd have to cover him back up right here, mark the grave, maybe move the garden to the other side of the cabin. At the cabin's back door, Sonia started sobbing. "Sonia, honey, he's been dead for a very long time," I said. "How long have you known that was there?" I considered. I found those coins, and I did wonder. I think I didn't let myself really consider it. Penny and Olivia are going to play here. "I know," I sighed. "We'll have to move him when Sam and Jimmy are here. It will be easier if we have one of the ATVs." I swirled the coins in my hat. They were so beautiful in the afternoon light, brighter and shinier than anything fresh out of the ground had any right to be. Sonia was on the back step, hugging herself, talking about the gold claim and the two brothers who had originally owned the mine, how she tried to trace their families but ended up at dead ends, as if they had both disappeared. "I don't want to sleep here," she said. "I want to hike out right now." I shrugged. There was nothing more I could accomplish in the garden, and I agreed that now even I was too upset to enjoy the afternoon. "Okay," I said. But the moment we stepped into the cabin, something was off. My eyes took a bit to adjust to the shadows, but there was movement, the window shades were bulging with the breeze, and the front door was clacking like someone had just exited that way. And Copper was barking crazily toward that door, but also cowering by my legs with every bark, ears tense like he was straining to locate something. I felt it too, my back prickling with the sense of wrongness. Sonia was frozen next to me, but I knew she was thinking the same thing I was. "What's missing?" "The hatchet," she whispered. And sure enough, the hatchet we had kept beside the wood stove for cutting up kindling was gone. I walked further into the cabin, wanting to look unflappable for Sonia's sake. If there was someone nearby slowly pilfering our stuff, and if that person was interested in things that could be used as weapons, we weren't going to stick around any longer than we needed to. I noted that the stack of silver coins in the middle of the table was completely untouched. I also noted, with relief, that my car keys were zipped inside my backpack right where I'd left them. Moving quickly, we gathered our clothes and all of the leftover food. Utensils and garden tools we would leave. We had planned to lock them up in the footlocker by the cabin's back door, but we decided not to take the time. Sonia filled our water bottles. I got Copper's bowl and leash ready, but he wasn't beside me anymore. "Copper!" I called. Sonia looked at me with wide eyes. I thrust open the cabin's front door in time to see Copper racing toward the canyon trail, barking madly as he went. "What is he doing?" Sonia asked. Panic was rising in her voice. I tried to stay calm, but I could feel myself starting to shake. There were footprints in the dust all around the front of the cabin, even up to the front window, impressions left by pointed toes, as if someone had crept to the window and looked in. And the axe was gone from the chopping block that stood near the rain barrel. Flashlights, rope, jerky, hatchet, axe. Was someone collecting what they needed, or depriving us of the means to survive? I yelled for Copper, again and again, but he didn't come. Monday. "Sam, I love you. Tell your brother that I love him too, that I was thinking of you both today. Someone will come to look for us, but let it be the sheriff, not you. I don't want you or your girls to come anywhere near Camp Arnold or the mine. It's cursed." Sonia and I agreed it didn't make sense to go after copper. It was early afternoon already, and we'd be stretching the available daylight hiking back to the car even if we started right away. I can't explain why, but I packed the coins, so many heavy handfuls of them filling our empty peanut butter jar. We strapped on our packs and walked away from the cabin, not looking back. But when we got out to the trail and saw Kappa's paw prints in the dust, we turned to follow them down into the canyon without a word. Sonia was ahead of me, setting a fast pace. Maybe she thought we could make it get copper and still hike all the way out before dark. I made plans with every step we took deeper into the canyon, thinking maybe we could drag copper back to the cabin for a sleepless, stressful night, then rush out when the sun rose. I could hear her saying something, but the wind had picked up in gusts and she was several steps ahead of me. She was looking at the ground, her steps uncertain. "There are no paw prints," she said, and now that I'd caught up with her I saw that it was true. Kappa's rounded prints were nowhere to be found on the sandy, stony ground, and as we turned to look up the path the wind shot through the carved pathway, bringing a ripple of dust with it to further obscure the trail. I yelled against the wind for him, squinting my eyes in the sun and dust, and then, there he is. I spotted him several yards down the trail, just a flash of curly red coat and whipping tail as he darted onward and was hidden by the outcrop the trail hugged. There was no question, then, that we'd continue on to get him, though there were still no prints to follow, except occasionally for the strange angular ones, the pointed toe and hard-looking heel, from whoever Copper was after. "He isn't barking at all," Sonia said, yelling even though the wind had died down some. "If you were chasing someone he would be barking, wouldn't he?" As we rounded the next bend in the trail I was disappointed not to see Copper. The trail of footprints had become regular and even. Whoever made them hadn't been running. Sonia pointed out cracks and crevices to our right, the sandstone alcove where she and Copper had hidden from the storm, and others. "There's a whole network of them, like lava tubes," she commented, but I was thinking of our deceased friend up in the garden and his cache of coins, of all the dangers he would have faced trying to mine for metals in a place like this. Nothing of value was ever reported to have been found in this canyon, but maybe he did discover something and could never get knowledge of it out of this place. There's always a catch with treasure. Finally we reached the bottom of the trail, where Copper stood looking up at us and wagging his tail, the same way he does at the door when asking to be let outside. I was furious, ready to rush toward him and grab him by the collar, but Sonia stopped me by clutching the back of my shirt. "That's the entrance to the mine," she said darkly, and now I saw Copper was standing right at the opening to a shadowy shaft leading God knows where underground. And there was someone inside with our flashlights and our rope, someone calling our dog to him, luring us under. "No, Copper," I told him, whistling him to me. "Come, now. We're going home." My stomach twisted as I heard an echo of my own whistle come from somewhere deep underground. The sound was louder and slower than the one I'd made, almost mocking. My blood ran cold. Kappa's ears perked up and he instantly sprang forward into the mine and out of sight. Sonia and I yelled for him, crouching near the mine's entrance. The blackness inside was nearly complete, but there was the faintest reddish glow emanating from deep within. Beside me, I could hear Sonia reasoning aloud that all she had to do was get a grip on him, get the leash on him, and then she could carry him back out to the trail and we'd all make it to the car. Meanwhile, I was having similar thoughts about Sonia. "No," I said, simply shaking my head, my eyes darting from the mine entrance to the trail and back. I was sure we weren't alone, certain to my core that we were running out of time and choices. "There's someone in there, Sonia," I whispered. She was straining to see inside the mine, holding her phone at arm's length with the flashlight on, but it was no use. The shaft was dark and cluttered with loose stones, steep and mostly featureless. There was a burst of sound from within, a clatter of what sounded like metal tools, a sliding sound of shifting rocks, and a high yip and whine from Copper, as if he'd been trodden on or kicked. This was too much for Sonia, and before I could protest she had shed her pack and crouched her way into the mine shaft, calling Coppa's name and shuffling forward until the winking light from her cell phone vanished. "It opens up," she yelled, her voice echoing up to me. "There's all kinds of stuff, old axes and wood and burlap sacks." Her voice grew fainter. There's a pit. It's deep, she made a disgusted sound. There are bones at the bottom. Someone died here. I don't see copper. There are other shafts, branching off, just like we saw from the trail. Come back. I yelled. We'll get help. Copper will last a few days. When she spoke again, her voice had lost all urgency. It was quieter, so the wind almost stole it. There's something here. It's beautiful. Sonia, come back. I yelled, and at last I was letting myself panic. Alone in the gusting dust, in the rising heat of the day, surrounded on all sides by the canyon's echoing walls. Even with the blue sky stretching endlessly above, I've never felt so trapped. I'm calmer now. It's been 2 hours. 2 hours of dead silence from within the mine. I've tried yelling, whistling, throwing stones, but there's been no answer. Only stillness. I dragged our packs closer to the trail to ensure they'll be found. I put a note in the front pocket with our names and who to contact, but hopefully someone will find these messages. It's too much to explain. I'm going in with only the light from my phone and one of Sonia's hiking poles. And the coins. My pockets are so full of coins they jingle as I walk. I can't leave them behind. I wish I knew why. Please forgive me for squandering this last chance to return home to you. I can't leave her here. Tuesday. Sam. I shuffled and scraped my way down the mine shaft, seeing at last what Sonia had seen: paw prints in dust, old tools, a path through the rubble that gave way to a gaping pit on the left side. I looked down with my phone. There were bones at the bottom and side, shrunken brown clothes, scraps of a person left by lizards and rats and whatever else might forage here. It occurred to me that this was the other brother, the brother of the man buried in my garden. I knew, somehow, that the coins in my pocket were his. He'd killed his brother over whatever treasure they'd found, then paid back his half of the claim into the earth to make up for his guilt. And maybe I had entered the bargain by unearthing that money. Perhaps I'd sold the betrayed brother back his claim, and our flashlights and rope too. Perhaps he'd bought back his life and was free to return to his mine at last. Perhaps. We find bones and tell stories. I might be making meaning where there isn't any. I unloaded my pockets into the pit, scattering the bones with what I decided was guilty money. Take it back, I thought. So your brother can rest and leave us in peace. As the last coins fell, their silvery clatter was answered by a distant sound, the tone of metal on dense stone, a hammer strike. I was afraid at first, then hopeful, then resigned. The sound repeated, becoming a regular beat that echoed across the rocks whose long shadows shuddered in time with my steps. There was no question in my mind that the sound rang out for me. I needed to follow the sound deeper into the mine. I was sure it would lead me to Sonia and Copper, to whatever evil thing was keeping them underground. I walked deeper, half blind in the dark. Tunnels opened up before me, a labyrinth of twists and turns. I didn't see whatever Sonia had called beautiful, and soon there were no signs of mining, no tools or scraps or marked stones. I was focused on the sound, the repeated clanging that grew louder and louder. It dimly occurred to me that I was ascending, my calves complaining as I hiked for what felt like hours. The cavern walls around me lightened, glittering dimly in the light my phone cast. Sandstone. I touched a wall and felt the smooth warmth of it, then rounded a tight corner and felt my heart freeze. There was daylight ahead, the warm glow of early evening. And the sound of metal striking stone stopped. I walked out into the light, crestfallen and furious. I screamed Sonia's name back into the cave I'd come from. I was back at the top of the canyon, just across the trail from the sagebrush meadow where our cabin stands. I was near enough to see the cabin, the stump in front, and the woodpile. The axe was catching the light where it stuck up from the stump, fixed back in place as if taunting me. I approached the cabin, cursing my decision to leave our packs down in the canyon. My phone was nearly dead. I wasn't afraid anymore. I had to know what else had returned. Maybe Sonia? Copper? The sun was getting low and the solar lights began to blink on. The hatchet was back by the wood stove, the rope and jerky back in their places. Our flashlights were sitting neatly on the table, as if they'd always been there. I took both flashlights with me back down the canyon trail. Sonia's footprints were in the dust still, and mine. I couldn't make out any of the angular footprints, and part of me wondered if there ever had been any. Had the flashlights and the rope and the hatchet been in the cabin all along? Had I truly found coins in the shallow dirt of my garden? A feverish hope rose in me that I would find Sonia and Copper waiting for me in the canyon, ready to lead me home by the hand, bewildered at my ramblings. Remember how Dad was, at the end, when he couldn't remember any of our faces? Except for Sonia. He never forgot his little girl. Our pack sat where I'd left them. I plugged my phone into my power bank and stupidly checked the tablet for a signal again. When there was nothing left to check, I squinted through my flashlight beam toward the dreaded mine opening. I had to go back in. Sonia was still in there. Again I ducked into the mine shaft, grateful for the brighter light cast by the flashlights. The emptiness of the mine struck me. It was easier to see the walls of the entrance now, the small piles of tailings and the crags around the pit. This time, my light caught a glimmer I had missed before, a shining vein of dark gold that looked almost like a bleeding wound in the wall, starting above the pit and then leading down into it, an unbroken line of precious metal. It was beautiful, and I let my flashlight beam follow the river of gold down the wall and into the pit, understanding how such wealth might turn brother against brother, driving them to ruin. The beam of light stopped at the bottom of the pit, pooling there for a long time before I understood what I was seeing. I couldn't see the bones and shrunken brown rags that should be there. Instead I saw Sonia, body broken, head dashed against the stony wall, a dark lake of blood pooling around her head. Copper was with her, his body halfway hidden under hers, utterly still. The coins I threw shimmered facelessly up at me, catching the light. I noted that they lay on top of Sonia's body. One rested neatly on her bloodied hairline, glimmering like a jewel. There were no hammer sounds now to call me away. The night is cold and unspeakably still as I write this. The mine was owed a debt, and it has been paid. That's the story I tell myself. But I don't understand it, so how can I expect you to understand? Don't come for us, Sam. It's over.